Housing is unaffordable for two reasons. One, Americans are broke. So it's hard to afford a house when you're broke, right? You don't have the down payment. You can't afford the monthly payments. So there's that. But then there's also the high cost of buying a house because houses are very expensive. They were driven up to high prices by, artificially low interest rates. But now the cost of building is higher. Raw material prices are higher. Labor costs are higher. So everything about it. But even if you buy a home, just maintaining it, your insurance is so much more expensive than it used to be. Your utilities, your property taxes, your maintenance bills. So it's expensive. Housing prices have to come down. But when housing prices go down, that affects the economy too, because a lot of people own houses and that's their biggest asset. And when their house goes down, there goes their net worth. And maybe they're using that as the basis for loans, or they're not saving as much because they got this home equity that can fall back on. The real solution to the housing problem, of course, is lower home prices, and a stronger economy where people can earn money to pay for it. But, we're just going to get more gimmicks. I mean, maybe they're going to try to reprivatize Fannie and Freddie. I know that the Trump backers put a lot of money on that trade and the stocks go up every day now. There's a lot of speculation that they're going to release these GSEs now. They've been in receivership since 2008, 2009. They're going to say that it's going to bring down mortgage rate and housing costs. I don't think it will. I want the government to get completely out of it. I mean, if Trump really cared about free markets, he would kill these things completely. The government should have no role in housing. That's why housing got so expensive in the first place, because of government. And government, look at it on a local level too, with price controls and rent controls, rather. I mean, rent controls and all the permitting processes and how long it takes to do stuff. I mean, governments interfere with the free market's attempts to provide affordable housing. Government makes housing a lot less affordable. But one of the things that's going to be happening is mortgage rates are going to be going up. And the only way to get them down is for the Fed to go back to quantitative easing, which means a lot more inflation. And that's probably what's going to happen, because otherwise rates are going to go into the double digits. And these prices are not built for that. Prices have to crash. But if you own a home and a mortgage that's got a 3 handle on it, you're not going anywhere. Your mortgage is your biggest asset, not your house. It's the mortgage that has the value. And so people want to hold on to those mortgages. And in order to do that, they have to keep their house. And so that helps to reduce the supply of homes, because the people that own those homes with 3% mortgages aren't going anywhere. Real estate is too expensive. So they shouldn't be trying to maintain high prices. They should let high prices come back down to earth. But it's not so much that the government needs to incentivize construction and home building. They need to stop disincentivizing it. It's the government that is the problem. So if they roll back a lot of regulation and red tape that never should have been rolled out, yes, that would help a lot. What we really need, though, is not more single family homes. We need more multifamily rental units, because most people don't have the money to buy a single family home. It's not just about can they afford the down payment? They can't afford to maintain them. They don't have the money. The average American has not even $400 in savings for a rainy day. How do you own a home if you only got $400 to pay for unexpected repairs? So most Americans are not cut out to be homeowners. They should be renters. So we need more rental housing. But one of the ways that you discourage rental housing is when there's a pandemic, you say that no one has to pay their rent. And, you scare the hell out of somebody who's like, you know what? I don't want to build rental units. I'm going to put some tenants in there. And the next thing you know, there's going to be another pandemic and I'm not going to get rent for 2 or 3 years. The governments vilify landlords, right? They're the bad guys. They're the greedy, Simon Legree, the image of the bad guy there to collect the rent from the poor woman who doesn't have it. He's going to kick her out, right? It's all the laws that are written in most communities are very pro-tenant and very anti-landlord. And that's also because tenants generally outnumber landlords, right? You have more people who are renting than who own the rental properties. Because typically when you own a rental, you might own 50, 100 doors, 200, right? You got all these rental units. You're just one vote. All your tenants collectively outvote you. So the politicians who are counting the votes, they want to pass laws that are favorable to the tenants. And so if you've got all, this stuff against you, well, all right, I don't want to be a landlord in that community. I'm not going to build any rental housing. I'm not going to take all those risks, right? So if you want more housing, you got to just level the playing field. Get rid of all these laws that make it difficult to be a landlord, that make it risky and expensive to be a landlord, because they're doing a good deed. They're supplying housing, right? Yeah, they don't supply it for free, but the farmers don't grow food for free. They expect to get paid when they feed us. They don't do it because they're just good people. They don't want us to starve. They want to make money. And I don't begrudge the farmer their money, because I want to eat and I'm going to pay whoever could feed me. And so if you need a house, don't get mad at the guy that provides it. Just be glad that it's there and pay him his rent. I think most of the jobs that were created during the Biden administration actually went to illegal immigrants because those were the ones that would take the jobs. Legal Americans didn't want them. And so the illegals took these jobs. And so to the extent that these workers are exported or deported, that's a problem for America. So it's not, just a panacea. Yes, there are some illegals here that are a drain on the economy. Either they're committing crimes or they're just, getting welfare and other forms of benefits. Yeah, we would be better off without those individuals. On the other hand, there are illegals here who work, every day, who do hard jobs under adverse conditions and don't get paid very much. They do a lot of jobs that need to be done that Americans would just assume not do. They'd rather collect welfare than do these jobs. And so we need people doing those jobs. If they get deported, then what? Who's going to do them? What's it going to cost? There's a lot of negatives to just mass deportations because we end up deporting a lot of people that were actually helping out and pitching in many cases doing more than a lot of, legal Americans who are doing nothing, right? If you're an illegal and you're here, but you're out there working every day, you're doing a lot more than people who are just collecting welfare who have, are legal American citizens. A lot of illegals work in agriculture. People are complaining about high food prices. Well, imagine how much higher they would be if we had to pay Americans to work in those fields. A lot of mothers who have jobs because their husbands can't afford to support them, they have illegals that take care of their kids because they can't afford to pay the legals. They're too expensive. So, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in illegals and the underground economy that we would be better off without. So just go and say, hey, we're going to get rid of all the illegals. It's probably going to do more harm than good. I mean, sure, if you could just kick out the bad guys, the criminals, and the welfare recipients, yes, if you can somehow only do that. But I don't know how that's going to be that way. I agree with Elon Musk, and I appreciate the sentiment that we need to really cut the size of government, but I just don't see the Congress that we have going along with it. And so you're not going to get Congress to eliminate agencies and departments and do any kind of mass layoffs. I'm not sure, in the executive, how many people that they could lay off, without having to get congressional approval. Of course, you got labor unions there that you have to deal with. The, government unions are pretty strong. I'm not even sure how easy it is to fire a lot of these people. So I think, it's just more talk. I mean, I've been hearing the talk for decades now, but I never see the walk, right? Because the political realities are what they are. And so this is just going to be more of the same. The government is going to get bigger under Trump's second term, just the way it got bigger under his first term. And when he campaigned, he promised to make government smaller. He promised to balance the budget and cut government spending and get rid of the trade deficits. And, the opposite of what he ended up delivering. He just pretended that the economy was great because the statistics, said things were good. But he ignored the fact that when he was a candidate, he said the statistics were lies. In fact, he even joked about it one time because he ran for office. Hey, the unemployment number's a lie. It's not 5%, it's 25%. And then as soon as he became president, he started pointing to the same phony numbers to show how low unemployment was under him. And somebody actually asked him at a conference, well, when you were a candidate, you said the numbers were fake. And he said, well, they were only fake back then. They're real now. And he kind of did it with a laugh. So basically he said, look, yeah, I was campaigning. He played politics like a Stradivarius as far as pandering to every special interest group that he could imagine. Obviously, as a consumer of energy, I prefer the prices to be lower, right? And so I want the market to develop the resources to the greatest extent that we can in an environmentally responsible way, which I think would happen in a free market. But the reality is we have a pretty vibrant oil and gas industry right now in the United States. I guess it could be even bigger, but oil is cheap. Oil's not the problem. One of the reasons that when you go to the gas station, you're paying more for gas, that's not because of the oil. It's because of a lot of the other prices on top of the oil, right? The taxes, number one, and then other mandates that are required to treat it. And then, the gas station has to pay a tax, property taxes, labor. There's a lot of other costs that are driving up gas prices at the pump. And just having cheaper oil doesn't solve any of those problems. But my point is that oil is cheap right now and it's not going to stay cheap. And so if inflation was a problem when oil was cheap, imagine how much bigger the problem is going to be when it's expensive again, because it will be. Biden dumped more than half of the strategic petroleum reserve on the market. That was to suppress the price. We never had a shortage of oil. So why did we tap into that reserve. What was the emergency? The emergency was the midterm elections, and they wanted to get some more Democrats in. But I think more recently, I was under the impression that the Biden administration leaned on Saudi Arabia to increase production ahead of the election. I think they called in some favors with Israel not to bomb any Iranian oil assets. And I think a lot of that was done to keep oil prices as low as possible when people drove to the polls. So obviously those pressures are going to fade a bit now, although maybe Trump could try to put some pressure now. But I mean, there's not an election and Trump doesn't have to worry about getting reelected. But I think oil prices are going to go up. Ironically, right? I mean, the whole basis for Bitcoin was the US government is in trouble. The deficits are unsustainable. We're going to have massive inflation. You need to have Bitcoin as a hedge. It's just better than gold. It's digital gold. So now all the people who were trying to come up with a way to succeed based on America's failure and the failure of the dollar. Now they're all, Trump is like, I love the dollar. The dollar's great. Why is he embracing Bitcoin, which was supposed to be a threat? Now they're talking about, we're going to back the dollar with Bitcoin, which is completely nonsensical to bring that up. I think that's absurd on its face that you would back the dollar with Bitcoin. I mean, because the dollar is supposed to be an alternative. Hey, don't buy dollars, buy Bitcoin. The Bitcoin was a competitor. You're admitting that your currency is no good if you have to back it by Bitcoin. If the US government ever did establish a Bitcoin reserve and actually bought like 1 million Bitcoin, which is what Robert Kennedy Jr. was proposing at that Nashville event, it would destroy the country because they would go in and buy the Bitcoin. And of course, they wouldn't buy it at 90,000. I mean, who knows? Maybe they would push the price up to 1 million if the US government came in and just paid whatever the price was for Bitcoin. But then what happens when they stop buying? The price is going to crash. And then there goes the value of their reserves. So once they establish a big Bitcoin reserve, they're kind of committed to buying more Bitcoin. And so now everybody who owns Bitcoin is now rich, right? Everybody's a millionaire or a billionaire. And so they want to start selling their Bitcoin because they want to buy a mansion and a yacht or whatever it is. Well, the only buyer is the US government because everybody else wants to sell because they all have money. So now the government has to keep buying more and more Bitcoin by creating more dollars to buy more Bitcoin, destroying the value of the dollar in the process. You end up with like hyperinflation because the government has printed so much money to buy nothing, to just buy Bitcoin. But then at the end, the government is broke. And so now it needs the money. So it has to tap into its Bitcoin reserves to pay the bills, except they were the buyer. And so when they want to sell, there's nobody and the market just collapses. It's basically worthless. But the US taxpayer ends up getting left holding the bag of all this worthless Bitcoin. But not only do we destroy Bitcoin, we end up destroying the dollar too, because we printed so many dollars to buy the Bitcoin. When Social Security first started, it was a 2% tax on payroll, but the worker paid 1% and the employer paid the other 1%. And so the idea was you're getting something for nothing, right? You're only paying 1 cent, but you're getting 2 cents worth of benefits because your boss is having to cover the other penny. But what people don't realize is any money that the government mandates your employer send to the government is money that they otherwise would have paid you, but they didn't pay it to you. They sent it to the government instead. Because when somebody hires you, you have to cover all of their costs associated with hiring you. And if there's a big payroll tax, well, you got to be productive enough to cover that. And if I'm an employer, I'm indifferent. If I have to give $100 to the government or I have to give $100 to my worker, the same to me, it's the same $100. I mean, I just assume give it to the worker. But if I give it to the government, I can't give it to the worker. So the worker doesn't get anything for free. The workers pay both sides of the Social Security. So you're not paying 6.5% or you're paying 13% because you're paying the employer's portion too, because that portion is coming out of your check. You just didn't see it because you never got it. It went straight to the government. Well, so far it's affected it pretty poorly. I mean, gold's gone down quite a bit since Trump was elected. He's not even president yet. I think his actual pregnancy is going to be good for gold because I think it's going to be a very inflationary 4 years. And, right now the markets kind of think inflation is going to be higher, but they think that's bad for gold because they think it means the Fed's going to be tighter. I think it means the Fed's going to be looser because it's going to be the loose Fed that's helping to create the inflation. So I think inflation is good for gold. And I think people should be buying this dip in gold and this, dip in silver.